The ankles had been tied together, and the hands had been looped and tied to the faucet handles. The girl was not absolutely dead when he began to cut the body in half.
Number one, he got off on the fact that he was torturing this woman and got to possess her by basically killing her. Number two, he derived a lot of pleasure by dropping the body off someplace where it would be found fairly quickly.
Police were left with very few leads.
There was no blood or very little blood at the scenes. They had taken steps to drain the body of blood before they moved the body from wherever she was killed at to where she was eventually deposited at.
In death, the Black Dahlia achieved the fame that had so eluded her in life.
The Black Dahlia case represents the sickest type of murder, where you have a victim who isn't just killed, but really tortured and desecrated.
Nobody had ever seen anything like it before in the history of Hollywood, and that is why it remains today Hollywood's most gruesome, unsolved crime.
He was gunned down in his prime at a busy Las Vegas intersection with hundreds of witnesses. Why was the shooter never ID'd? Number 4, Tupac Shakur.
I mean, that case scares the crap out of everybody involved. In fact, the people involved are the ones who understand retaliation probably better than anybody else.
You had a guy who's an icon in the music industry, one of the greatest rappers, who got killed senselessly.
In the world of rap music, no star burned brighter than Tupac Shakur.
You know, Tupac represents not only, you know, a controversial figure, but Tupac is somebody who's complex, both volatile and also radical.
What we're doing is using our brain to get out of the ghetto any way we can. So we tell these stories, you know what I'm saying? And they tend to be violent.
On September 7th, 1996, Tupac and his manager, Death Row Records president Marion Suge Knight, left the MGM Hotel in Las Vegas after watching a Mike Tyson fight. Suge led a procession of luxury vehicles on their way to a nightclub. His only passenger was Tupac Shakur. Suge's BMW stopped at the corner of East Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, an intersection that was about to become an infamous crime scene.
There was another car that pulled up alongside them, and some individuals began firing at the car, hitting Tupac several times. Suge Knight, I believe, got grazed, and Tupac went to the hospital.
The shooter sped around the corner and disappeared into the chaos of the Las Vegas Strip, never to be seen again. Tupac died 7 days later.
You had 10 vans full of guys when Tupac got shot. None of them came forward. These are not the people that go, hey, let me tell you what I saw.
You know, frankly, you come forward, there's no guarantee you're going to be around long enough to be a witness in the case.
LA gang unit cops quickly pointed the finger at a man Tupac and Suge had confronted earlier that night, a known LA gang member named Orlando Anderson. Anderson was never formally charged with the crime. He was gunned down 2 years later at a Compton car wash.
Well, a rapper-on-rapper killing is a lot like other gang killings, which is, you know, those witnesses don't want to come forward either. They'd rather deal with it in their own way. At some point, they'll bring their own type of justice. They don't even trust the system.
To this day, those who know who killed Tupac aren't talking.
It is a misconception when cases are unsolved that the police don't know who did it. A lot of times they do know who did it, and they just don't have enough evidence to arrest them.
4 bullets tore into him, but the singer did not fall. He stumbled up 6 stairs and said only, "I'm shot." Number 3, the murder of former Beatle John Lennon.
John Lennon was the embodiment of peace and harmony and nonviolence.
He was a symbol for changing the world, and it was so expressed in his music.
John Lennon loved walking the streets of New York. He enjoyed fans approaching him for autographs.
One such fan was Mark David Chapman, a failed charity worker turned suicidal obsessive with a history of mental problems.
He was completely psychotic, and he had this obsession with John Lennon. And a lot of these murderers, they have this desire to be known for something, to be known for something grand.
On December 8, 1980, Mark David Chapman waited all day outside John Lennon's Manhattan apartment, the Dakota.
Lennon was coming home with Yoko Ono. We were coming home from a recording session. A fan stepped out of the darkness and shot him.
Chapman crouched combat style and yelled out, "Mr. Lennon." He fired 5 times.
John yelled, "I'm shot," and he staggered into the vestibule and collapsed right there.
2 shots struck the singer in the back, and 2 lodged in his left shoulder. The fatal shot pierced his aorta. Police arrived almost immediately.
They couldn't even wait for the ambulance, threw him right in the radio car and took him right over to Roosevelt Hospital.
The staff in the emergency department said, no, this is impossible, this is another person. And only when Yoko Ono followed about a minute later did the staff say, oh my God, this is the real thing.
Lennon lost more than 80% of his blood. Chapman used hollow point bullets designed to inflict maximum and final damage.
In spite of all of our efforts, blood transfusion, surgical procedures, intravenous line, ventilation, breathing tubes, John Lennon was pronounced dead.
After the shooting, Chapman threw off his hat and coat and sat down on the sidewalk. He pulled out a copy of The Catcher in the Rye and began to read. Police arrested him on the spot. Chapman planned to plead not guilty by reason of insanity.
The only defense that had any chance of prevailing was that he was delusional, that he was suffering from a mental illness.
2 weeks before his trial, Mark David Chapman told his lawyer that he spoke to God.
Mark is still a very religious Christian person and believes that he is going to, quote, go to heaven.
Chapman was sentenced to 20 years to life for second-degree murder.
Very good chance that Mark David Chapman will never see the light of day outside of a prison cell.
Chapman admitted he became a murderer as a way to get attention, cursed by feelings that he was a nobody.
Clearly, there are better ways of going about achieving fame and a name for oneself.
What happened to Lennon was shocking because it wasn't happening to a president or a political leader. It was happening to a singer.
In a 1960s interview, Lennon was asked how he expected to die. He paused and then said with a smile, "I'll probably be popped off by some loony."